Welcome back to Philosophy for Flourishing, the show where we explore principles and practices for living the best, most fulfilled life possible. And today I'm joined by Luc Travers, the author of Touching the Art, a guide to enjoying art at a museum, and more recently, Stories in Paint. And we're going to talk about art and its connection to flourishing today. And I want to start off, Luc. A lot of people, they take their time with art. They use their time when they're going to look at some art or do anything art related, to go to the movies, to read a book, to watch Netflix and binge on Netflix. Perhaps this is a sort of pessimistic view of how people spend their time with art, but you focus mainly on painting and the visual arts. And I know you do some work with literature as well, but primarily with visual arts. And so let's start with where's the value in visual art that people are missing, and why do you try to convince people, and how do you try to convince people that they should pay more attention to visual art, that they can get something out of it? What is there to get out of it?
Hey, John, I'm glad to be here. And you're starting off with a big question right off the bat. But before I get into that just too much, I want to say that if I have a choice, immediately I go to the movies. I turn on Netflix. I pick up a novel, audiobooks. Oh my goodness, I love Audible. Lonesome Dove series most recently. I went to see Dune a couple nights ago. Oh, fantastic. I don't know. I'm watching Succession right now, but I love consuming art in all its forms, including the ones that you might think, oh, this is not sophisticated, and I see the visual arts as an extension of that love of art, not as something that's separate, that's special, that's like, oh, here's something holy that we go to. No, for me, it's an extension of going to the movies. It's an extension of sitting down and watching Netflix. And as an alternative to sitting down and watching Netflix, I'll look at an artwork and spend some time reading an artwork. So I think that kind of gets to a little bit of the overall feel of the approach. I don't see the museum as a mausoleum. I see the museum as a movie theater, as a place where we can go in and have a fun experience, have a moving experience, laugh and cry and feel something and be with friends.
Yeah, and I think that's the distinction that I'm drawing on here, is that people really do see the art museum, as a mausoleum, and not as an extension of the sort of art that they spend more time with, that they enjoy, that they have moving experiences with. So what makes that different for you? How do you take something similar out of the visual arts that you get out of the movies that you watch, the Netflix, the Dune, the literature?
I like that question, John. How do I take something similar out of the visual arts that I do with literature and movies? And it's because I approach the visual arts in the same way that I would approach the movies. And there's one key part of that I think is a key part of the kind of experience to have, and that is to suspend disbelief. When you go to a movie, you let yourself get swept away by the characters. You're imagining that they're real. For those 2 hours, you are living the story. It's happening there in front of you. Now, often when you go to an art museum, you don't live the story. You don't suspend disbelief. You don't imagine that what's happening there in front of you in the painting is really happening. Most of the time, what it is, oh, here's an artifact by an artist. And in order to gain an appreciation of it, I need to know the artist, or I need to know the art history, or I need to know something about technique, or I need to know something about style. It's not, let me immerse myself in this story. So one little quick analogy I like is, when you go to a movie, you don't take a tour guide with you to tell you about the director's influences and, how it represents a certain period of time. And you especially don't do that while you're sitting there watching a movie. So there is a place and time for getting some background. But you remember DVDs, right? When DVDs existed, you would have like the DVD extras, but they would be separate. You'd watch those after you watched the movie. And so I like to make that distinction even when I'm in an art museum. Let me first immerse myself in the story, suspend disbelief, imagine that these characters are real and that there's a compelling story going on that I've got to figure out and piece together and experience. And then if I'm interested in the art history or things like that, that will be something separate.
Now, I want to dig into your technique, but first, it's a very unique technique. You don't hear of a lot of people doing anything but the first, but going and looking at the little plaques next to the artwork and saying, "Oh, this is a Renoir, or this is a Delacroix, and it was painted in this year."
Great
And oh, look at the
pronunciation, by the way.
brushstrokes. Thank you. I took a little French in high school, and they do turn it into a history lesson, but you have a very different approach. And I'm wondering, how did you come up with this approach that is so, outside of the mainstream of looking at art?
Oh, it's because I was frustrated. I studied art history in college. Got my degree in art history, started grad school in art history. And what I discovered, John, is that every time I came in front of an artwork, I might have like a brief emotional response. Oh, like this is cool, or this is nice, or this is beautiful. But most of the time, I would have, after I'd have that least like brief emotional response, I would immediately want to go to an art history text to give me the meaning. I would want to go to the plaque to learn about the artist. I would want to have all this supplemental information. And what I was realizing is that I was not having the kind of experience that I would while reading Cyrano de Bergerac, or while watching an opera like Traviata, or like seeing a movie like Last of the Mohicans. No, I was having a history lesson, and I was trying to substitute a history lesson for an art experience. And so that frustration is kind of what drove me to try to figure out, how to do this. And I got one little story that kind of crystallizes for me that fundamental mindset, that suspending disbelief mindset. And it's my little niece, and this is a story I tell in my first book, Touching the Art, where my niece at the time, Quinn, was 2 years old, and we go to the zoo, and it's just she and me. It's niece uncle day, and we're walking along through the zoo and going, heading towards the lions, and she's got the map in front of her, and she's walking, 2 years old, and I'm kind of looking around. I'm feeling pretty confident, and then suddenly I turn around and she's not there. And I look over, I say, oh my goodness, where is she? And then I start to see her doing something sacrilegious. She starts climbing on a little embankment, and there's a statue there, a statue of a girl and a boy, and she starts climbing and touching the statue. And I start to freak out for a moment, but then I realize, okay, I'll calm down. It's an outdoor statue, so maybe they're not going to be persnickety about touching the art. And so I go up and I look at what she's doing. But first, my art history brain comes into focus, and I say, oh, that looks like maybe 20th century realistic. That's unusual to have a realistic artwork in the 20th century. But what I see her doing is she sits in the lap of this girl who's sitting cross-legged. And in the lap of the girl, she sits, and beside her in the lap is a bronze cat. But my niece sits down and starts to pet the cat. And
very cute.
And very cute, and for me, very profound, because there was a stark contrast between my mindset and her mindset. She wasn't seeing a bronze statue from the 20th century. What she was seeing was a new friend and a cat with soft fur. And it wasn't soft fur that she was touching. It was hard bronze, but she was suspending disbelief and imagining that this was real. And so that bit crystallizes for me the kind of approach that I wanted to take to overcome my frustration with art, to change my mindset from having an art historical mindset to one where I'm treating it more like a movie. And then I started to try to think of, okay, what do I do when I read a novel? What do I do when I when I watch a movie that I can apply to the visual arts? And over time, I figured out several techniques that will help me and have helped others to immerse ourselves in the story.
So it took a child's perspective to help you unlock finding the meaning of statues and paintings, that and a lot of hard thinking. That's a beautiful story. Thank you, Luc. And so this experience, this helped you sort of head down this track of unlocking the meaning of paintings and sculptures. What is the technique? How did you, what eventually did you settle on for unlocking that meaning?
And I kind of like the way you framed that question in terms of there's one technique, because if I were to say something as one technique, I think I could say something. There are lots of little tips, but they are all fundamentally based on one major technique. And that major technique is, I'll call it reading the artwork, not just looking, not just feeling, not just researching, not analyzing, but reading the artwork. And what I mean by that is, let me draw a comparison again to literature. So this is another way in which literature's, what I do with literature has helped me with the visual arts. When I read a novel, I'm reading and enjoying, and I'm getting all these words, and then I'm imagining the characters, the setting, the action. If I just read without imagining, I would not have this world. It would not be a complete experience for me. The onus is on the reader in order to provide the mental images that go along with the concepts that describe the action and the characters in a novel. And I view the visual arts as the reverse of that, where you are provided with the mental images, you're provided with the images. And to complete the experience, you provide the words. So in the instance of literature, you're presented with the concepts. To make it come alive, you provide the concretes. With the visual arts, you're presented with the concretes. To make it come alive, you provide the concepts. And so this idea of reading an artwork is something that I found very valuable as I guess the technique for getting into the story of an artwork. And by reading, I don't necessarily mean analyzing or dissecting. There are ways of making that painting come out more, making it more alive, like bringing dialogue to the characters, like imagining movement, like imagining the sensations that you would feel or the sounds that you would hear if you were in this place. Treating that novel almost like you're the author of a short story, and you are providing the words to bring that story to life in the artwork.
I love this technique that you're talking about conceptualizing what it is you're seeing and really introspecting about it and putting it into words that you can then take with you. You know, when you're just looking at a painting and having sort of a first emotional reaction to it, that's something that's pretty easy to lose. It's sort of like, you know, reading something and it's in one ear and out the next. Perhaps you'll have some sort of afterglow of that emotion, but I think, you know, this technique of putting it into words, at least on the surface, makes a lot of sense to me, because then it's something that you can relate to other experiences more easily. So I'd love to try this out. I know we had talked beforehand about doing that, and for you guys listening, I definitely recommend checking this episode out on YouTube. It's the unusual episode that really requires the visual, but I'll do my best to describe what I see when we look at some artwork here.
All right. Well, John, I've got a couple options for you, and we can go about it one of two ways. One is I could show you each, and I'm going to ask you one particular question for each, and that is to come up with your own title, just on your first impression, own quick title. And for your audience out there, this is a technique that I use every time I go into an art museum, or anytime I come across an image, is I immediately try to give it my own title. And it could be something as simple as people on a beach or the sun shining, whatever it is. But it's a way of immediately condensing down your first impression, giving words to it. And it also invites more inquiry, because embedded in a quick title are some implied questions. So maybe we should do that. Maybe I'll show you the two different artworks. And these are two artworks that are featured among the 50 in my book, Stories in Paint.
Okay.
And then after you give each quick title, then you can pick one that you're intrigued by or not intrigued by, because I think one of the things that I'm hoping to show with my book is there'll be a lot of beautiful artworks, but there will be some that you're going to say, that one doesn't seem like it'd speak to me, or that one doesn't seem really interesting. And one of the things that I'm hoping to convince people of is that artworks deal with human beings, and human beings go through things that are universal. And a great artwork is going to capture and be insightful about a moment in the human life that you'll be able to relate to. So, are you ready to see maybe a couple of options?
Yeah, let's see the options.
All right. So, here is option number one.
Ooh,
what's your quick
I've seen
title?
this one before, actually.
Mm.
This is titled "The Death of Socrates," but if I had to title it without knowing that, I would probably call it something like, an interesting drinking party, maybe.
Okay, great. Now that's intriguing. Yeah, that is probably maybe the most famous painting that's going to be in the book. All right, so here's a second one.
All right, what is going on here? Okay, so the death of Socrates, I take it for granted that most people can understand what was going on in that one and perhaps has seen before. But this one, let me just describe what I see, and then I'll try.
Well,
to
no,
give
quick title first. Quick
title. Okay.
First impression. Sometimes it's really challenging. It could be as simple as like two people.
Yeah, I very much feel on the spot here and unable to come up with something
that's
that
fantastic,
encapsulates
John.
the whole thing. But
that's great. That's great.
I would say that this is 18th century. Man, this
I love
is
it.
so hard to title.
That's fantastic. No, but this is part of the an indication of the kind of challenge that reading in an artwork entails. Now, it's not always a challenge because guess what? You mentioned, how I went to my niece to get a taste of what it is to suspend disbelief in front of an artwork. But reading an artwork is also something that's very natural for children. I'll tell you a quick story about this and to lead up, because I think this will be very interesting. I remember going to a friend's house who had like a 1.5-year-old, and I got to participate in their bedtime ritual. And he pulled out a storybook, a normal everyday storybook, big images, a few words. And he started telling the bedtime story. It's probably one of these books that he's told the bedtime story for many, many times. But then as I was observing, I saw something kind of interesting. He wasn't reading the text. He was describing the images, and his daughter was enraptured. She was wide-eyed, looking at everything. And what that gave me, I asked him afterwards, okay, why do you do that? And he said, well, sometimes the words on the page don't match with the images. And what I was seeing there is a child who wanted to put words to what they were looking at in the world. And I think that that's something that children naturally do with images, with art. They love it. They want to put words to it. And then maybe sometime in school, sometime when we become adults, we're taught that art appreciation is more about the history or about your deeper feelings, but not about conceptualizing what it is that you're seeing. And I think it's become a kind of skill that has been lost to time for a lot of people.
Yeah, case in point, I couldn't give that thing a title. If I had another go at it, I would say guy and a girl looking at a piece of paper.
Great. That's beautiful. Because why that's beautiful, John? Because there are some implied questions. Guy and girl, who are they to each other? Are they married? Are they brother and sister? Piece of paper? What are they doing looking at a piece of paper? What is this piece of paper? Why are they looking at it? And so now I've got an invitation to unfold a bit of the mystery, to turn the page on the artwork, to look more deeply and try to figure out what's going on. Shall we do that one?
Let's do it.
All right. So I'm going to go back to it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a few questions. And the kinds of questions I'm going to ask you, John, are the questions that are based on that technique that we've talked a little bit about, the reading and immersing yourself. And there are different kinds of questions. And there are also since this is an artwork that's featured in the book, there are also the questions that are in the book, and that will give you a taste of how each of the 50 artworks are approached. It's meant to be an interactive, immersive experience where you are diving into the artwork first, and then I share my thoughts, my observations. So after we discuss a little bit, I'll share a little bit of what I have written about my reading of the artwork. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. So, John, what do you see going on in this story?
All right. So immediately I see that they're actually not looking, neither of them is looking at the piece of paper. So I see a probably 18th century Enlightenment era couple. The woman is wearing a large white dress with a blue ribbon around the waist, and she's got some sort of hair extension. Her hair is falling very low. And the guy, you know, he's got the fluffy, the fluffy things around his wrists. I'm not sure what those are called.
I don't know either. That's good enough.
And he's actually looking at her and admiringly, it seems. And she's looking at us, the viewer. And he is seated at a table with this red tablecloth that is sort of long and touching the ground. And he's got several glass instruments on the table. And one of them looks like it's filled with water. The others, I can't really tell if they've got anything in them. And then some sort of like glass bulb thing on the ground by his foot. So that's, I think, the thrust of what's going on.
Right. You've given a bit of an inventory of the things that you're seeing in this image. Now, just a kind of meta question, John. If you spotted this painting as you're walking through an art museum, would it be one that you would stop in front of?
I might stop in front of it momentarily. I have actually a suspicion of what this is depicting, and I know.
Oh, really?
I do, yeah.
Cool.
And perhaps this is just too conceptual an analysis of it from the get-go. But this reminds me of I think it's Lavoisier, or another Enlightenment scientist who was instrumental in isolating oxygen, I believe.
Oh, interesting. So you are seeing the figure of the man, and you are recalling an Enlightenment scientist named Lavoisier that you're associating with him. So you're bringing in some kind of historical context that seems to fit with what's going on in this particular scene. All right, that's very interesting, John. John, I've got some more questions for you. Okay, so what has he been doing?
He's been writing. He's been writing on a piece of paper in front of him. He's got a quill pen, and it looks like he was, probably taking down some observations, perhaps from the instrument with water in front of him.
Okay. Yeah. So he's got all these instruments, and maybe he's been taking down some observations on his piece of paper with his quill. Is he doing that right now?
He's not. No, he's been interrupted, I guess, by this very attractive lady who's now resting on his shoulder and looking at us, the viewer.
So if you rewound the scene a few moments, what would you see?
I think you'd see him probably left hand on his head, very focused on what he's doing, taking notes on what he's doing, and not really, just oblivious to the world around him, just very involved with his work. And you'd see her probably at the doorway, walking toward him.
All right. So why did she come over? Was it to look over what he's working on? Was it to call him to dinner?
Yeah, it's probably not. It's hard to tell from the painting why she would do that, because she's looking directly at us, the viewer. The implication is that she's come over here in order to sort of have us look at her, or to have the painter look at her and capture this moment. So there's a little bit of a staged feeling to that aspect of it.
Oh,
That
yeah. So then that's interesting, John. She's staring out at us, at the viewer. But let's do what my niece would do. Let's suspend disbelief and imagine that let's extend the scene outwards. Who could she be looking at?
She could be looking at perhaps their pet dog.
Bye, he's just coming to the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is she looking at a tax collector? Is she looking at a friend? Is she looking at a guest?
Well, she has a very warm smile. And so that it's definitely indicative of comfort. And it's a sort of smile that I would have if I saw my dog, like, rolling over on his back, as he often does, and just making himself comfortable. It could be also a smile reserved for a child. Maybe one of their children is playing that room, although that seems unlikely given all the glass instruments.
That's true. That's good connection. Yeah. So it looks like she's looking at somebody, and she's come over to the scientist and interrupted while he's working. What is his attitude to being interrupted? I'm going to zoom in for you here to
thank you.
Be able to see a little bit more. Is he upset? Is he disgruntled?
No, he doesn't seem upset or disgruntled. He seems a tad maybe surprised and quizzical, like, how can I help you, sort of thing. But it's not cold. It's very familiar and comfortable.
Now, if she were to speak to us at this moment, what would she say? You know what? I've got another question before that one.
Okay.
What is her attitude towards him?
Comfort. She just seems very relaxed, very comfortable. This is someone she obviously is intimate with. It could be a lover. Or it could also be a brother-sister relationship. What
do you see that suggests comfort?
The way that she is leaning over on him, on his shoulder, and it's a very informal sort of posture. She obviously knows him pretty well. This isn't something you do with a stranger.
Oh, this is great. This is great. So I sometimes coming up with a quote is the most challenging part. And I often find it to be the most rewarding part of looking at the characters in a story. So I can imagine him maybe looking up and saying, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And then seeing how that fits in with what I'm seeing. And it brings the characters a little bit to life. John, are you ready for me to share my reading?
Please, yes.
All right. So my reading essentially is here's what I'm observing. And it answers these questions that I've laid forth to you, and it'll provide a little bit of background information that will help us not gain a greater historical understanding of the time period, but gain a deeper understanding of what's happening in the story here. Oh, and also very importantly, and I don't think we've talked about this, John, that is the essential way to making the visual arts powerful is something that you do that's implied with literature and movies, but you have the opportunity to make it more explicit with the visual arts. And that is to personally connect with the character's situation, to empathize with them, to put yourself in their place and ask yourself, when have I had a moment like this? All right, you ready, Bayou?
Sorry about that.
Here we go. A young woman in full white dress leans over a man sitting at a table covered in scientific instruments and papers. It looked like she has come over to him, and as she leaned over, he paused, quill in hand, and looked up at her. "Oh, hi, honey," it looks like he could be saying, pleasantly surprised. "What exactly has he been doing?" He seems to be in the middle of some scientific work. The stack of papers suggests he's been taking extensive notes, while multiple glass containers of varying shapes and sizes, objects that remind me of a high school science lab, are spread on the table. There's even a bulbous glass ball on the ground at his feet. in this pristine palatial room. Here's a little spot of a messy laboratory. It doesn't look like he's been currently experimenting. The tools don't look to be in use. And he wears a pristine black jacket and white ruffles puffing out at his wrists. But he does look like he's been in the middle of some frenzied writing. His quill still keeps his spot on the stack of papers that are spreading off the table. His head might have been in his left hand as he bent down in concentration, and his right leg energetically juts outwards, belying the formality of the stately pillars behind him. He's been a scientist. He's been a scientist in the throes of his passion, and he's just been interrupted. What is his reaction? Is it to frown and say, like Ebenezer Scrooge counting money, "Get out, I'm busy"? Or is it like someone relieved to be pulled away from drudgery? Neither. He looks simultaneously delighted by the interruption, yet still in mid-work. At any moment, he'll go back down to his work, but he will not have lost his place. I can imagine a small smile breaking through as the feathers flitters. So, who is this woman? And why has she interrupted him? Is she a servant? Is she an assistant? She looks quite elegant in her wig and chiffon dress to be his assistant, but there is a chair with an artist portfolio behind her. Was she sitting there working on something before she got up to interrupt him? And why is she interrupting him? Did she come to check on his work? If she has, I imagine she'd be looking down at those spread papers, but instead, she's looking at someone else. Is she looking at a friend of his or a friend of hers? I imagine it's a friend of hers. He'd be more interested in the guest than he is if it were his friend. So I imagine her walking over to her husband, I'm assuming her husband, while he works, and then saying, "Hey, honey, the Duchess is here for a visit." She just goes up to him, leans over, and looks back with a look of casual possession and pride, as if to say, "This is my husband. This is the man I love." Her name is Madame Marianne Lavoisier, a young woman living in the 1780s in Paris. Her husband, Antoine, is one of the most reputed chemists of his time, and she seems proud about that. She would actually work with him, doing sketches in collaboration with his scientific research, and she's fully at ease with him, comfortable enough to openly display her adoration for him to visiting guests. And his attitude is one of delight at being interrupted by her. Who is a person in your life you are proud of saying to the world, "They are with me"? Alternatively, who is someone you would be delighted to have interrupt you while you work on your passion?
Beautiful reading, Luke. And it's interesting that I was able to sort of guess that it was Lavoisier. I don't think I've seen this painting before, but it is a very striking one. And these questions that you ask here at the end are very interesting for thinking about how to connect to this artwork. For me, it's definitely my wife, Rosalie, and I think she'd feel the same. And we're lucky enough to work side by side most days. She works from home as well, and to have moments like this one. So it's definitely a painting that I can relate to at that personal level.
You know, if Rosalie were to walk in here and then kind of lean over your shoulder while I'm watching you on video and say, "Oh, hi, Luke," and she would lean over like that, I think that would be perfect, because yep, that would be the exact kind of moment that we're seeing here.
It certainly would be, and most days that would be actually plausible and possible, but she's at an appointment right now.
So, all right. Now, this is a painting that you can find at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And it's called Lavoisier and his wife. And if you're more interested, if you like this painting and you want to discover more from the artist, his name is Jacques Louis David. That's the artist's name. FYI, he's the same artist that did the other painting that I was suggesting to you, the one that you called The Death of Socrates. So that's just a taste. And one of the things that I found really fascinating as you were going through it, John, a lot of the details that you're pointing out were things that I was seeing as well in my reading. And, even something like when you're talking about how you were imagining how a few moments before he would have his head down on his arm, and we were even talking about the ruffles in his in his sleeves, and all these observations. We're seeing the story. We're kind of experiencing this movie together, and then we can come away and have this kind of experience that we've had together, a shared experience. And then just as you talked about something personal in your life that made you think of this, then I could talk about something, people in my life, and have this bond with you over this artwork that we share together. And this is part of what I'm excited about with the book Stories in Paint, is it's 50 opportunities for you, not just alone by yourself to experience art, but to ask each other these questions, to read the artwork together, and to come away with a kind of shared art experience that you're both going to enjoy. In fact, your first question was about what makes the visual arts distinctive as opposed to movies and Netflix and things like that. And one thing very important that I would say is that when you watch a movie, TV show, or you're reading a novel, the story keeps going. And if you pause, you're missing the story. If you turn to somebody in the movie and you talk to them, the characters are going to still talk on screen. Now you can, if you're at home, you can pause it, but the experience of the story is done with you and the story. The experience of the story for the visual arts can be done in conversation with others.
Yeah, it's a beautiful part of it. It really allows you to connect, enables you to connect with those around you over the artwork. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people do this with movies and TV shows, but they're not doing it while it's happening. And it's not really a part of it. It's the reflection after the fact.
Yeah.
So very nice. So this is one in Stories in Paint, and there are 50 in that book. Is that right?
That's correct.
And these are artworks that are you can see in the book. Presumably, there are also ones that are featured in galleries around the world if you wanted to go see them in person. Is that right?
Galleries only in the United States. So this is making it accessible for you as audience. Maybe later there'll be artworks from around the world, but these artworks are selected because they are works that I've shared with tour groups at all the museums that I visited. I've given dozens of art museum tours at most of the art museums in the United States. And so over the past 15 years, I've collected kind of the favorites, the ones that audiences responded to the most, the ones that felt like they were the most compelling stories, had the most insightful moments into life. And so I've got them all together, double checked with the museums to make sure that they still have them, and now I'm sharing them so that you can enjoy them at home. Now, this is a big coffee table book. It's like 11 by 11 square coffee table book, so that when you're reading it, you open it up on your coffee table, you can sit side by side with your Madame Lavoisier. And there's also, John, I'm trying to make this as immersive as possible to make it feel not like a book, but an art tour, like one of the art tours that I give. And so there's a digital component to it. Each artwork of the 50 has its own QR code that leads you to some extra content. And that extra content includes a zoomable image that you could then, see all those details, like what exactly are those tubes and glass objects that he has, and where exactly is his quill on the paper, or how is she holding her fingers while her hand drapes over him. And you can see those details that add to the story. And also, there is an audio book component. So immediately you can have like a conversation with me. It'll be, I'll ask you the questions, you can answer them with those you're around, and then I'll read my reading. And so I'm trying to make this feel like an alternative to Netflix, not a history lesson, not okay, now let me put my technology away and be somber, but something where you will you will feel like there's something exciting, vital going on as you experience the art, and you can approach it in any way you like. Just focusing on the artworks, flip it open and see, oh, that looks intriguing, or oh, I wonder what's going on here. Go to the audiobook portion, read it on your own, whatever you like. Multiple ways of entering into these stories.
Now, the book's not actually out yet, am I right? Or is it available?
It is not out yet. And this month I'm doing a Kickstarter. So right now, if you go to kickstarter.com and search for Stories in Paint, Luc Travers, you can pre-order your book. You can pre-order the book. The digital or the ebook will be available in December. The hardcover, beautiful 11 by 11 mega book will be available in February. Will be shipped out in February.
Excellent. So perhaps maybe a Christmas present of the ebook and maybe an IOU of the full book when it comes out, if people are interested in gifting that. And that's Luc, L-U-C, Travers,
that's right.
T-R-A-V-E-R-S.
That's right. That's right.
Excellent. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I'm definitely excited to get my hands on the book. Anything else that you want to mention to people before we sign off today?
Oh, there's so much, John. Can I come back and talk more about art with you?
I'd love that.
And I'd love to. I know that the fundamental topic of your podcast is human flourishing, and maybe that could be something that we talk about another time. But I want to say that I'm an educator, an art educator, art appreciation educator, literature educator, and the visual arts have been such a pivotal part of seeing my students grow. And they've been such a pivotal part of seeing myself grow. They've been such, and I'll just give a teaser of two ways in which the visual arts have helped me with this. One is they help me introspect. They help me process the kinds of moments that I see in the art and ask myself that question I asked at the end: when have you had a moment like this? Such a powerful question to look inwards, to ask yourself, oh, is this something that has happened to me? And when you can answer that question, it does two things for you. It can either provide for you a vision of something that you want, or help you process an experience in your life. And when I look at that Lavoisier portrait, I think to myself, this is something that I want. This is something that I'm going to pay attention to. This is something that I'm going to look back into my life and see when it's happened, in order to cherish and to use the artwork as a kind of a funnel for all these experiences that it will stand for. And then I can use that as something that I can look for in my life that will help me flourish more.
Excellent. Thanks so much for the beautiful conversation, Luc. Everyone, if you're enjoying the show, let me know with an email at john@theobjectivestandard.com and give us a rating. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, John.